All right, let's get right into it. We're going to focus on one really critical week, a week back in November 2025. This is where you see this perfect storm of crises. We're talking political, economic, and legal, all crashing down on the Trump administration at the exact same time. It really pushed everything to the brink. So to really wrap our heads around what happened, we're going to break it down. We'll look at these three main fronts: the political chaos, the economic turmoil, and the showdown in the justice system. Then we'll see how they all came together to create this massive breaking point. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the political earthquake. This is really the thing that set everything else in motion. We're talking about a massive, sweeping rejection from voters at the polls that honestly sent shockwaves through the entire political system. So, on Tuesday, November 4th, it was just a huge night for the Democrats. And you see this quote here from Tom Bonier, a political data specialist, that really nails it. He says, the Republicans ran on making things affordable, but then they governed like, in his words, reckless authoritarians. People felt like the promises just didn't match the reality. And just like that, poof, the administration's whole claim that they had a mandate from the 2024 election, it was just gone. I mean, it was already a pretty shaky argument to begin with, given that more people actually voted for other candidates. But after these results, yeah, there was no way to spin it. So you might think, okay, a big loss like that, maybe it's time to compromise? Nope, not even close. The response was to double down hard. Trump publicly demanded that Republican senators just change the voting laws to make sure, as he put it, Democrats would most likely never obtain power. But here's where it gets really interesting. That demand was met with a brick wall from inside his own party. Mitch McConnell's response was just blunt. We're not going to do that. That simple sentence spoke volumes. It was a huge signal that there were serious cracks and divisions forming. Okay, so while all that political drama is unfolding, a second crisis is brewing. This one's on the economic front. The economy was really starting to show some serious signs of trouble, even though the administration was trying its best to paint a much rosier picture. And here's a perfect example of that spin. They put out this thing about a Walmart Thanksgiving meal, claiming prices were down a whopping 25%. Sounds great, right? Well, when you actually looked closer, the 2025 meal had fewer items, and they'd swapped out all the brand names for the cheaper Walmart brands. So it wasn't exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, and people figured it out pretty fast. Adding to all this economic pressure was a huge challenge to Trump's signature policy, the tariff war. It ended up in the Supreme Court, and the question at the heart of it was actually pretty simple. When we put tariffs on goods, who's really paying for them? And the answer we got was, well, it was kind of a bombshell, and it came from the administration's own lawyers. In court, they had to admit that it's American consumers who are paying anywhere from 30 to 80% of those tariffs, not foreign countries, us. And while that was happening in the courtroom, out in the real world, the consequences were becoming painfully clear. Just look at this number, 1.1 million. That's how many layoffs had been announced so far in 2025. That's a huge number, the kind of thing we hadn't seen since the Great Recession. And it wasn't just about jobs. If you were trying to travel, you felt it too. There was this critical shortage of air traffic controllers, which meant 40 of the busiest airports in the country had to cut flights. We're talking a 10% reduction, which, as you can imagine, meant a whole lot of chaos and cancellations. So we've got the political crisis, we've got the economic crisis, and right on cue, a third front opens up, the legal system. And here, the administration wasn't just getting serious pushback, it was also becoming, well, a bit of a punchline. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The Justice Department, with all the serious things it could be doing, decided to focus its resources on prosecuting a guy for throwing a salami sandwich. A sandwich. The agent claimed it exploded on his chest. Naturally, people started to wonder, are these really the DOJ's top priorities right now? And how did it end? Exactly how you'd think. The jury acquitted him, like, immediately. The whole thing became a national joke. You see comments like this one, "He beat the rap." And it just perfectly captures how it eroded even more public trust in the Justice Department. But it wasn't all just jokes about sandwiches. On the very same day, some really serious stuff went down. We're talking 2 huge rebukes from federal judges. One in Chicago, where a judge found that federal agents had violated protesters' rights and lied in court, and another in Rhode Island, where a judge flat out accused the administration of defying a court order and withholding food aid for political reasons. This was the system pushing back hard. And this is where it all comes to a head. You have to understand, these three crises, political, economic, legal, they weren't happening in separate bubbles. They were feeding off each other, amplifying one another, and creating this just intense pressure cooker situation for the president. So let's recap. You've got this massive political rejection from voters. That collides with an economy that's clearly in trouble. And at the exact same time, the courts start pushing back and asserting their independence. It's the definition of a perfect storm. And the administration found itself more and more isolated, backed into a corner. So, looking at everything that happened in that 1 week in November 2025, it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? It's about the strength of our institutions. When a government's power is being challenged on every single front, by the voters, by the economy, and by the courts, what happens next? That's the real cliffhanger.